Hello, welcome to Aucademy, whatever we call it now. Is it Aucademy Educates or In Discussion? I'm not sure.
Just Aucademy's fine.
Yeah, Aucademy's fine. We're going to talk about neuroqueering today. I like talking about neuroqueering, if nobody's noticed. I may have a bit of a thing for it. We should probably start with physical descriptions. So my name's David Gray Hammond. I'm a white Mediterranean male with a shaved head and a beard, thick rimmed glasses. I have a lip piercing and an ear tunnel thing. And I'm wearing a green and grey and black stripy t-shirt, sat in a room that is largely blue with twinkly lights next to a bookcase that everyone is terrified is going to fall on me one day. Chloe, do you want to go next?
Oh, I'm Dr. Chloe Farahar. It's quite nice to be a guest. I am a white person with actually quite a fuzzy head at the moment. I haven't shaved it for a while because I've run out of spoons. So I'm quite fuzzy at the moment, with giant glasses and a giant black fluffy hoodie in my office.
Okay, and Rachel, would you like to give a description?
Yeah, I'm a white non-binary person. My name is Rachel. I did that in the completely wrong order, but it's fine. I've got a black background with the neurodiversity symbol at the top in some like rainbow stuff because, you know, gay. And a yellow and black hoodie. I also have a lip piercing and 2 ear stretches, although not as big as David's.
Libby. Libby says they are a white person with dark hair and headphones in a dark room with swirly projected lights on the wall. Always good to have those swirly projected lights.
I have lights, you just can't see them.
Sai, would you like to give a physical description?
Sai says there's still a pigeon. And this is because we're quite concerned that Snap Camera is actually meant to be closing, and so, which is quite sad because a number of us use the filters to feel comfortable to be on screen. So we're hoping, because Sai is still a pigeon, that we'll have it for a little bit longer.
Okay, so neuroqueering. We should probably start by talking about what neuroqueering is, which is probably a whole life in itself. So neuroqueering, neuroqueer theory, it's kind of it came out of queer theory in itself, and Nick Walker talks about it in her book Neuroqueer Heresies, unsurprisingly. And I should add the note here that one of the things that Nick Walker says in her book is that any attempt to define neuroqueering is in itself sort of a misdirect, really, because anyone who is neuroqueer is fundamentally trying to subvert expectations and standards. So I guess easily, for me, I can talk about what it means to me, which is it's all about, it's liberational. It's about liberating myself from standards, from that whole idea of what is normal. So for me, it's about authentically expressing myself and embodying myself, because society does not expect me to be authentic because I am autistic and ADHD and schizophrenic. So society expects me to try and appear as normal as possible, and I don't do normal. Does anyone else want to add what neuroqueering is to them?
Shall we? Yeah, maybe if we could we could do it in order. I'm quite happy to go. I did a whole, it's my idea of a short. It's 6-minute TikTok, which is short for me because if anyone knows, we usually go on for a couple of hours on Aucademy. So I did a 6-minute TikTok about neuroqueering. I quote from Neuroqueer Heresies, so Nick Walker's book, and kind of talk about it for myself as well. So my understanding is it's subverting anything that's classed as so-called normal or just what is classed as the standard or typical. And that means, and we had this discussion briefly before we even came on live, that means that even a cis, straight, neurotypical or relatively neurotypical person can neuroqueer. They can practice subverting what it means to be normal, to create change, to create a more authentic them as well. So I know Rachel was going to talk about that, I think, because I think Rachel, you did say about authenticity, I think. Don't worry, I might be misquoting, it might be David. But just this idea that we are subverting everything that's classed as normal. And at the moment, I guess, the normality that's kind of shoved down our throats and actually creates a lot of harm is the sort of cis, straight, neuronormative standards. That's what harms us. And so if anyone, including those cis, straight, neurotypical people, can be subverting that, it can potentially it can potentially help a lot of us who are unable to perform neurotypicality anyway, or perform cis and straight. That's really waffly. Feel free to watch my 6-minute video on TikTok.
Rachel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go for a little bit of a less nuanced version, a bit simplified, so don't come after me for it. It's being autistic but with extra rainbows. Like, it's autism's cool, but like being a queer autistic, that's just a whole different experience. I mean, I used to kind of I hide quite a lot. Like I used to have like a long fringe and like you got baggy clothes and stuff like that, because I didn't really want to be like have attention drawn to me. But now I can identify as neuroqueer. I'm like, oh yeah, bring the rainbows, bring the fire, bring the pyre, the party truck, bring everything. You know, we want to be as loud, as colourful as possible. And I think it's in a way, it's not just identity thing. It's also it's colours, it's culture, it's art. It's in everything. It's in unique engineering. It's in you know, creative ideas. It's subverting what is expected by making something completely new that's completely against anything we've kind of come into contact with before. And I think there are so many ways to neuroqueer. It can only be a kind of a general term for so many different things, which is why I think when David was talking about it being a misdirect, is because there are so many different expressions of it. It's like trying to describe something that as soon as you put your finger on it, it goes again, because it's changing, and that's the whole point. It's kind of, in my mind, it's always evolving, it's always becoming something different. So that's kind of how I see it personally.
Yeah. I think JSIC is here, but they're off camera for a little bit, but they would like to add something on this.
I don't know if they meant now or when they get the chance.
Oh, okay, right, okay.
So we do have Sai's comment as well. So as a reminder, Sai's on screen is a pigeon. So Sai says, it's rejecting traditional models that define neurodiversity, gender and socializing, etc. In negative and limiting terms, neuroqueering can help to shift cultural attitudes towards a more accepting and empowering view of neurodiversity. And I think to add to that as well, because what you said, even when you sort of gave your own introduction, David, about being autistic, ADHD, I think you said ADHD, schizophrenic, etc., is the fact that Nick talks about that you can queer, you can subvert even what it means to be autistic, even what it means to experience psychosis, for instance. Like, the whole point is we don't and shouldn't have to meet any stereotype of what is expected of us. Hopefully, as long as we're not harming anyone, basically. But yeah, if you are autistic, some autistic people feel really uncomfortable and still alienated when they come to the autistic community, because the autistic community does have relatively a particular narrative and way of explaining sometimes what it means to be autistic. And so that can be quite alienating for some people. And so I know that the idea of neuroqueering, even what it means to be autistic, was really empowering for people like Victoria, who's part of Aucademy and been on Aucademy before. So yeah, just this idea that you can subvert the things that are already subverting.
Yeah. And I think that's what's important about neuroqueering, is that it validates everyone's experience. You know, it's that recognition that we can embody our own truth. We can be. It's that old saying, you know, in a world where you can be anyone you want to be, the best thing you can be is yourself. And that's sort of like a, you know, I like that. I think Jacek might have had something to add. Is Jacek there now, or?
Mm-hmm. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, I'll come on camera in just a second. Sorry, but for this, I really want to emphasize also, like, to me. So someone already said it, kind of, but like trying to define neuroqueer is kind of like antithetical to what neuroqueer is. But if we're going to define it, I think it's conceptualized, or can be conceptualized, in the context of decolonization. Like, we are decolonizing our lived experience in every way possible, because we're, like y'all are saying, subverting the normative narrative of what it is to be neurodivergent, to be queer, to be any of these things. And I really like what Chloe said about like, even a cis-het person can practice neuroqueering, because it's just another, like, there is no such thing, if we're moving away from pathology, right? There is no such thing as neurotypical and neurodivergent. Like, we're just operating with those terms on the paradigm that we exist in, because we have to. So if we're decolonizing, neuroqueering is for anybody, because that's the structure that we're trying to shift, like the new paradigm that we're trying to shift into when we're embracing neurodiversity.
Yeah. There is something really important I want to add as we start out, which is I'm aware that we're 5 white people and a pigeon, and being able to neuroqueer is a privileged thing, because if you subvert the wrong expectations when you're multiply marginalized, it can put you in danger. Being authentic can be dangerous if you have certain marginalizations. If you're a person of color, if you're queer, you know, if you are authentic in the wrong environment, if you subvert the wrong standard, there are people who will, it's dangerous sometimes, because people don't appreciate the status quo being threatened, and they especially don't appreciate it being threatened by people who are multiply marginalized.
I think that's a really good and very important point, because it then means that those of us that do have privileges or privileged existence to some extent, we can neuroqueer to make it safer, to some extent, or at least have neuroqueered spaces that will be safer for people who can't subvert, like say, out in the world, because it's just not safe.
Yeah. And this is the thing, is when you're liberating people, sometimes you have to make sure that you leave the path safe for other people. You know, there's no real liberation if half of you are left behind, you know. But yeah, the thing is, with the actual act of neuroqueering is such a broad thing. I know Nick Walker in her book talks about people neuroqueering, like talks about monks with certain meditative practices that queer their neurology, and the use of psychedelics. I talk about it a bit in my most recent book, the whole idea of like how I sort of changed the way I express and think about myself through the use of psychedelics and meditation, and this is probably my neuroqueerest thing, I think, is the way I view my psychosis, because most people want me to view it as an illness, and I don't. Like, and it really upsets some people, because, like, just to be completely open, I do take medication for my psychosis, but I don't see it as treating an illness. I see it in the same way that an ADHDer might see taking Ritalin. You know, it's a tool that helps me cope in a world not designed for someone with the way my brain works. So, you know, something I've talked about in my own writing is the fact that for me, psychosis has played a role in my neuroqueering. It's given me an opportunity to explore what is real for me, what is authentic for me, you know, what is my truth. And I think this is where you start getting into some of the heavier conversations in neuroqueering, is that it's not just about being autistic. It's not just about being ADHD. It's not just about being neurodivergent. It's about every single one of us having the space to be who they are, to subvert the things that they feel serve no purpose. Oh, Libby's added, slightly biased as a history student, I find neuroqueer theory interesting in its historical creation, such as how behaviors and specific ways of being have been historically determined and the counterculture that evolves in response. Yeah, and I think that's really important as well, because when you think about the pathologization of neurodivergence, like that's something that has built up over history. You look back over the history of neurodiversity, you look at the way, for example, autism has been conceptualized throughout history. You know, it started out as like a subset of childhood schizophrenia, and, you know, then it was the whole refrigerator mother thing. It was always, there is something wrong, something has been done to you to break you. But, you know, one of the ways that we queer that standard now is the neurodiversity movement itself. You know, we subvert the expectation of seeing ourselves as broken people and say, well, actually, I'm not a broken neurotypical. I'm a neurodivergent person, and I accept myself for who I am, and I don't see myself as disordered. And that in itself is a kind of neuroqueering. I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking. Does anyone? Oh, there we go.
No, it's fine, because obviously we're speaking for, we're voicing Libby and Sai's comments. So Sai here says, it, meaning neuroqueer, it seeks to deconstruct the idea that there is a single dominant way of experiencing neurocognitive development and behaviour, just as queer theory critiques the idea of normative heterosexuality.
Yeah.
And if it's okay, I just wanted to flag, because I thought this was quite helpful and a useful point from how I've understood neuroqueering. And this is why this is interesting, because everyone's got a slightly different, we're subverting even the idea, like you say, of what neuroqueering even is. And that's actually probably quite beautiful, and I'm sure Nick would be pleased. So Bobby is asking, do you think some are just naturally, in quotation marks, neuroqueer? And then they mentioned that their youngest is naturally neuroqueer, and they've given Nick's book to them. So the way I've understood neuroqueering from having conversations with Nick Walker, and we'll flag the Aucademy lives that we've done with Nick about what is this thing called neuroqueer. So the way I've understood it is you can be, relatively speaking, born and develop in a neuroqueer way without practicing, without consciously trying to subvert anything. So we could argue that many of us are naturally subverting normalcy or normality, in quotation marks, by being autistic. We're born and we develop in an autistic way, right? So we could arguably be naturally neuroqueer. But there's also, Nick's point is that it's also an action. And I think from Nick's point anyway, is that's the important bit, that we are actually actively trying to subvert. So I would argue that I am neuroqueer because I was born and developed as an autistic person. But I'm now actively neuroqueering my gender, for instance. So this is where, when I was with Nick, I was just like this, just like, oh, you've just blown my mind, because I now use they, she pronouns, but I'm even queering what it means to be non-binary, for instance, because I don't consider myself non-binary. I consider myself to be an autistic woman, and that is not the same as a non-autistic, relatively neurotypical, or somebody who can perform neurotypicality. So I'm not like a neurotypical woman. So I'm actively subverting even what non-binary might mean, and things like that. Hopefully that makes sense to people, because I've thought about this a lot, and I find it is very empowering to be able to say, actually, I don't think non-binary sits with me. I don't think that makes sense to me, but they as a pronoun does make sense to me, because I don't feel like a typical woman, right? So it's very freeing, I think.
Just to add on to that, actually, I kind of mentioned it about JS6. Sorry, is it JS?
Jason, yeah, Jason.
Words. Technically, I'm a linguist. This is hilarious. One more time.
Jasic.
Jasic. Got it.
Jasic.
Thank you. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
You're good. You're good.
I have to say, like, I complimented their pronouns before we came on because am I right to share? Can people see what they are?
Yeah, if we take off the banner and we take off the 2 seconds.
Their pronouns are they, it, and I was just like, I resonate. I've never seen someone use they, it, and I was like, honestly, they, them, sure, they, it, perfect. They, it is like the best way to define it because like they, them, yeah, like in a nutshell, but they, it, covers everything. And I think even that's kind of neuroqueering non-binary as well, because like, yeah, I resonate with it, and I probably shouldn't because it's some dehumanizing on a level. But like, honestly, smacks. It just smacks.
Can I?
Like on another level, it just feels good.
Can I speak to that actually for a second? Because this is part of my neuroqueering of gender as well. Thank you, Rachel, for speaking on that. And I'm so glad that you saw it and it resonated. Like that just gives me all the feels. But for me, like I've been slowly creeping my way into itdom, we can call it, because you're right. Like historically speaking, it for a long time has been used to dehumanize trans people. But in my world, I'm just human and barely at that. Like that's my gender, like human, but barely. And and so I finally embraced it. I even have it on my business cards now because like that's the world I want to live in, where people can just identify as what they identify as and live authentically and be fulfilled and stay safe in that identity. So for me, it's like I'm subverting what it is to be a human gendered person. It connects me to, it's a spiritual thing almost, like it connects, and primal, it connects me to pre-colonialism, like to the origin of humanity, where I'm just a creature on this earth and I'm connected to all parts of it. So it, for me, allows the space for that experience and how I experience gender. Because gender is like I don't even, gender is its own entity, and sometimes I feel it and sometimes I don't. So yeah, it just allows me that experience and allows me to communicate about it. So I'm finally embracing it. But yeah, thank you for talking about that.
I would love to add to that as well, because I've seen your they, it pronouns, and I think it's awesome.
Thanks.
Because you literally are subverting what it means to be human, because we have been taught, don't call humans it. But one of the biggest moments for me in neuroqueering was realizing that literally every piece of knowledge we have is in some way socially constructed.
Yes.
You know, even data, like objective data, is interpreted by humans and society. So, like, our idea of what it is to be human was built by society. So that it gets really intense, but there is no sort of objective truth to it. Humanity is whatever we want it to be. And if we want humanity to be an it can be. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Dave. That's what I'm going for here.
But the thing is that Jasic, you are beaming. Yeah. Like you are, is it, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it fair to say you're feeling, I don't know, seen or
very seen? There is euphoria in this space for me because I feel wholly seen for who I am. I feel safe. I feel accepted. I feel celebrated. Like that, this little micro sphere of existence, or whatever you want to call it, like this is what I want for the entire world. Like to be able to subvert any expectation and just exist and be accepted and celebrated for existing, because we are all creatures on this earth. Like it boggles my mind that we can get so far away from that, you know, and cause harm. So I thank you all for engaging in this topic with me and seeing me, witnessing. Like that's fucking beautiful.
I'm full on now considering being a cisgendered male who uses it pronouns.
Oh my God.
Pronoun? Sorry.
Please.
So, yeah. So Sai says, by queering the neuronormative and the heteronormative, you can help create a more inclusive and diverse cultural understanding of neurodiversity, gender, and sexual orientation. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Like, this is the thing. It's like, our entire cultural understanding of humanity was built on like all these weird colonial Eurocentric ideas that are very revolve around white supremacy, and
Yep.
like when we queer those expectations, we fundamentally change the meaning of everything. Like,
I have a quick add-on. Yeah, just to that effect of like when you were saying maybe I'll be a cisgendered man who uses, like, I want to remind people pronouns are for everybody. So you can, like, just like Chloe was saying about being an autistic woman who uses they, because like pronouns, language, we make meaning out of the sounds coming out of our mouths. So literally the only way that we can have objective truth is that we agree as a social contract. We agree that this is a blue chair and this is, you know, a blue sky, you know, that kind of thing. So when you as a cisgendered person, this is just the same as neuroqueering, right? Like you're queering your existence without having to belong to the LGBTQ community. That is allowed. Queering can be used in more than one context. And I freaking love that, because as Sai is pointing out, the more we do that, the more the world shifts into a more like inclusive existence. Like it becomes safer. When cisgendered people use they, it becomes safer for anybody else to use it or they. I want to make that very explicitly clear. You get 2 thumbs up for me there, David, for doing that if you want.
Yeah. Rachel adds neuroqueer it the F up.
I'd like to add, I put little stars in even in the chat, so it wasn't explicit-ish.
That's why I said F. If it had said the word, I'd have said the word. Like,
that's why I thought I'd censor it out, because I knew someone's just going to read that straight out.
I swear on these all the time. I'm so sorry, y'all.
We did have a content note, didn't we, which was going to be content note swearing and then S tons of queering, basically.
F it up.
And I really, if it's okay, I'm just going to read Tristan Webber's comment. And I think this is really important as well. So they said identifying as neuroqueer and now consciously neuroqueering. So again, remembering it's an act as well as just who you are to some extent. And now consciously neuroqueering has celebrates my neurodivergence and non-straightness in a way that the term queer could never have done. And I think there was another comment they made to add to that, which was, somebody else made the comment that was, I honestly didn't understand queer and its meaning today until finding neuroqueering as a concept I liked for myself first. And so, yeah, like I say, it's queering what it means to be queer. It's again, none of us have to fit into the boxes that anyone makes.
We get to make our own boxes or have no boxes. Like that's the beauty of being human, the complexity that we get to embrace in this existence, in this shared existence. Like, God, I'm gonna shut up before I go on some philosophical tirade.
I see a lot of pages that say, and it's wonderful, they say, it's safe to be queer here, it's safe to be non-binary here, it's safe to be trans here. I want to create a space where it is safe to be human here. Like, and I think that's what neuroqueering fundamentally is for me. It's creating spaces where it is safe to be human.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Do you mind if... Oh, sorry, go on, Rachel.
Sorry, no, go on. That's all right.
No.
I was going to say, just from my own personal life, I've been started to recently. There's been something opened up where I live, which is basically a you lot are gonna love this, neurodivergent queer meetup group. Right, once a month. Right, it's fantastic. It is the, how do I say this politely, the biggest group of queer neurodivergent people you have seen. Like, imagine you times it by 10 and then fill a room full of it. That is this group, right? And it's fantastic because technically it's a social group, right? We all go to socialize, and me and my partner have been going for a couple of months now, and we still don't know anyone. It's great. It's a great social group. Haven't spoken to anyone, but it's just so nice. I mean that does speak definitely to being autistic. There's a whole room. I know they're like me, but still, there's a lot of them. We'll stay in our little corner. It's great. Everyone has found a way in a 4-cornered room to make their own corner. There's about 16 corners. It's fantastic, and it's just so nice to just sit and be in I've never been in a group of about 20, 25, 30 people where I've actually felt like this is fine. Genuinely, everything's fine. And not everything's fine, but like, oh, I see someone hand flapping. I'm a hand flap now. Like, oh, I see someone grabbing doing this, and I'm going to do that too now. And it's kind of, and it's a massive collection of just the actual essence of being neuroqueer. There is so much gender expression, sexuality expression. There's a person there who has a beard and has a cane, and I'm in awe every time I see them. It annoys me how jealous I am of this person, how good they look. I wish I could pull that off. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, but even I'm looking around. I've been gay. I've known I was gay before I knew I was autistic, and they were pretty similar timelines. And to actually, like, in my 20s, be people that I thought didn't exist when I first got diagnosed, because you hear about autism and it's like boys, girls, not them. And there's that kind of that kind of binary gender aspect to it, but also just being gay and autistic at the time was just like, we're talking 10 years ago, but still it was like, those don't coexist. Of course they don't. And now I'm like, oh my god, they're everywhere. We are everywhere. You find an autistic person, you find a queer person, they're probably the same person. And I think it's just so nice that I have access, and people that were, my friends and that have access to a space like this. And I wish we could have little pop-ups of it everywhere. But I'm very lucky to live in a space in a place that obviously will accommodate that kind of spaces and give us physical spaces. And I think a lot of, when we talk about neuroqueering and kind of mixing queer and autistic, I think the biggest thing that we overlook is that queer people have a space to go. Autistic people don't have a space. There are safe spaces for gay, not everywhere, I'd like to stress not everywhere, but there are safe spaces for gay people in the UK to go, to hang out and to socialise in a safe way. But there is no such space for autistic people, even queer autistic people. And I think having a space like that really kind of shows what's possible, and it is just everything what it is in my mind is what neuroqueer describes, which is just an absolute bending and breaking of every single neuronormative thing you could find, and shaking a stick at it and going, we can do better, and we do. And it's fantastic. And I just share that because I just want people to know that these things are happening. They are coming up. They may be in small towns and they may not be everywhere yet, but there are places like this that are beginning to exist. And I'm just really lucky to be in a place that has access to that. Do you know what I mean? So, but I think, yeah, just it's coming. It's because, you can't stop it. But it's just a case of, I think we're a little bit more in it than most people. And that's why I love coming on here and doing things like this, because we get to share things like that. And do you know what I mean? Maybe other people get ideas and think, could we do something similar in our town, and that kind of thing. So I think, it's just, again, neuroqueering what it means to have a social space in that sense as well.
Yeah, I mean, Sai obviously has added that it's extremely liberating to be in a space where you can be as authentic and safe as possible. And I'd like to build on that, because I think back 20 years ago, I lived in a town on the south coast of England where it was not safe to be a foreigner, a person of color, to be trans. I was unknowingly to me, autistic male who did not understand why we kept categorizing people based on their genitals, and did not understand why people had all these arbitrary labels assigned that put them in these boxes. And even just being that outside of the box, that I didn't understand the boxes, met me with some pretty unfortunate events. And this is why the autistic community has been so nice for me, because by coming into the autistic community, I've discovered things like neuroqueering, and suddenly I'm in a world of people who actually just kind of get that everything's pretty arbitrary and we can just kind of be who we are. And it's liberational. Like I have been liberated from this idea that I have to fit into someone else's definition. And I can do it relatively safely.
I think just if I can flag this so that I can add to what you've just said as well, David, which is so Minkwell said this quite early on actually about neuroqueering, subverting because it is necessary, not just for the sake of it. So like you say, the importance of things I'm still trying to work out about myself, and things that I'm not even sure how I would describe how I experience the world still. But without people being brave enough and authentic enough, particularly when it is potentially dangerous, I wouldn't know certain things about different ways of being queer, for instance, and things like that. So my point is, without people being very obviously different and showing and queering and subverting what it means to be normal in all sense of the words, so like you say, in terms of gender, sexuality, and just how they interact with the world because of their neurocognitive abilities and styles and what have you, I would just still think I'm broken. And I wouldn't have a shaved head. I wouldn't do the kinds of work that I do. I wouldn't communicate in the ways that I do that feel better for me, feel safer for me, and all this kind of thing. You know, I neuroqueer teaching, you know, education is still hundreds of years behind. We are still stuck in a very particular way of experiencing learning and education and things. And everyone thinks I'm strange when I start teaching them. And then it just becomes the norm. But then it's like, okay, well, it's become the norm now, so we have to queer that a bit more, right? We shouldn't feel comfortable with stuff becoming completely the norm. Almost, I feel, with neuroqueering. It's like, okay, we've got to this point.
Progress.
Yeah, we've got to this point of normality. We've normalized certain things, you know, whatever it might be, stimming in class and, teaching without really speaking and whatever it might be. Okay, we're in this nice normalized position. Okay, that's dangerous. Let's queer it a bit more. How much further can we keep going?
I kind of just wanted to jump onto that, Chloe, because I want to talk about something that I did last year. Actually, I've been invited back this year, which means I must have done something right. I did a guest lecture at Canterbury Christchurch University last year on my work, and I thought this is the first time I'm in this kind of not a sort of seminar or conference position, but certainly in terms of teaching environment. Right, I'm giving a guest lecture. And I thought, I'm giving a guest lecture on autistic language and autistic experience. And I thought, what better way to do this? Because I'm in control, right? I'm not sat in a class. I don't have to do it the way, right? And I thought, what's the best way that I can show as well as teach? And I've got a picture on my website. I took sensory lights into a lecture hall. And I made students, well, I asked, obviously. I was like, does everyone mind if I turn the lights off? Because you can't really see them with glaring LED horrible lights on, and everyone was like, no, it's fine, turn the lights off. And I actually gave a lecture with like 4 or 5 sensory lights going at the same time. I'm going to do it again this year. I'm going to buy more sensory lights. We're going to have one in everywhere there's a plug socket, and it's just going to be like a lecture, like a fun one. I guess as people that can go to university, have gone to university or are currently in university, I'm sure you've always been a lecturer that's like bored to death. No one was bored, I don't think, in my lecture, because if they weren't looking at me, it's fine. There's something else for you to look at. If it's not the slides, it's all right. There's lights. It's fine. There's lots going on. And if you look, pay attention better by looking at stuff, there's other things. And I had stims. I actively stimmed throughout the presentation. So kind of what you're saying about not kind of queering and neuroqueering education is that when you're in that position of, this is my classroom, this is my space, this is my time, how can I use this most effectively? And like you say, you'll do one thing. I brought in a couple of sensory lights. I thought that was fun, and a couple of stim toys. Now, it's gonna be a magnificent array of light STEM toys. I might even bring some for class for students to be like, you have your own STEM toy. You know, like one of the things I did at the start of the presentation was like, take your shoes off, get comfortable. I know this isn't like the normal way of having a lecture run, but I was like, it's my space, it's my time, and if it's my space and my time, why shouldn't you be comfortable? Why shouldn't you be able to engage in education in a way that is comfortable for you? And it's that kind of engaging, but also still teach, but have, like you say, a kind of non-verbal queering of the space as well, and not just, you know, of identity and personhood, but also of how you affect and interact with others as well. Which I think, you know, is really important to pick up on as well. When you say in you know, kind of queering education, it's not just about saying, hey kids, gay people exist, cool, done. It's about actually being a neuroqueer teacher, educator, holding that space for students. So much so, again, they invite me back, so I must have done something right. And I think, you know, like you say, it's not just one area, it covers everything.
This kind of, like, it leads me into thinking about, like, the way I sort of think about how neuroqueering works is like, you know, those scenes in films where you've got the bad guy and there's a huge group of people and one person feels safe enough to stand up to them, and then all of a sudden more and more people feel safe to stand up to them. And I kind of think of neuroqueering like that. Those of us who are safe enough to neuroqueer right now, we do the neuroqueering to make other people feel safe enough to then queer the expectations. And so, you know, by those of us in the most privileged positions starting the ball rolling, we can clear a path for others to come through with their own experiences. And it's remembering that as we do that, they may not take exactly the same path that we take, because we all bring our own experiences to the table, and no one person's experience is more valid than another's.
And I would say a part of that privilege, right? Like the privilege paving that or pioneering in a way. Part of that is going to be specifically handing over the mic to people. I'm not saying that you weren't saying that, but I just wanted to explicitly state.
No, I don't, like, as someone using their privilege to neuroqueer, I don't see myself as like a leader.
Right.
I see myself as more like a scout. I'm going forward to make sure that the path is safe so that other people can come after me. I'm not saying to people, come and do this the way I'm doing it, and I'll make sure that you're okay. Like, it's more like scouting ahead. You know, those of us with the privilege to scout ahead, we do that so that other people can take their own path and have an idea of what the landscape's like.
Totally.
I just want to add on to that, actually, because it reminded me of another thing. I was in the shops about 6 months ago now. I was just doing boring chore stuff, and I saw a kid in like school uniform. They'd kind of been older than like 13 or something, and they had like pixie ears on in public. And I just looked at them and went, neurodivergent, nice to see you. But it was like this subtle nod to, God, I wouldn't have dreamt of doing that when I was a teenager. But it was kind of almost, thank God they can. And it was like to think that someone like their mum was just didn't care. Come on, we've got shopping to do. And like they were just like straight up full on like pixie ears. And I was just like, I mean, there's signaling, and then there's signaling. But I just thought, what a wonderful thing. I mean, I know it's Brighton, but still, what a wonderful thing to be able to see that in public and just have, and also have the parent just be like, get the carrots. Like it wasn't a, you're embarrassing me, take them off. It was just onwards, you know. And I think it was such a lovely, you know, it's just as a queer autistic person who had spent quite a lot of their childhood trying to pretend I wasn't. It was so nice. So I think, like you say, David, it's and actually being and seeing that in your lifetime, I think is actually quite powerful as well. So it may not be, you know, going at the same rate everywhere. And obviously, I think, you know, Brighton, Hove, Sussex, you know, Worthing, they're all quite accepting areas to a degree of more than the rest of the UK. But it shows that it's moving in the right direction. And if the right direction is pixies in Lidl, then so be it, you know. And I think that's what you mean about taking them. Like, I personally wouldn't wear pixie ears in public, but if that's what you want to do, then you go for it.
Yeah,
and that's the point, isn't it? You go for it.
I'm a Brighton and Hove local, and it is like there is a level of queering the expectation in this city that you don't tend to see in a lot of other cities. There's definitely still a lot of work to be done. But like, I always think actually, like, as you mentioning that, something you used to see on the regular in Brighton was there was a person called the Disco Bunny. And it was just a guy who used to just rock up. He'd set up a big speaker and he'd dance. And it would be whatever dance they felt like doing, you know, like, and they just do that for hours. And it was just completely normal around here. Like, no one batted an eyelid. There was like, they were wearing like tight lycra and like shiny costumes and just dancing in the middle of the street. And everyone was like, yep, business as usual. Like,
I love that.
It's just the fact that no one really bats an eyelid about things like that. They're just kind of cool. Yeah, that's Dave. Yeah. Unless you're going to pay him, keep moving.
I think because we have been quite positive and actually quite autistic stimmy joy, I think, in this discussion. And just agreeing with each other like really emphatically, because it's just this beautiful thing. Obviously we've brought up the fact that we have a level of privilege that some people don't, to be that authentic self. I do want to talk a little bit about it is still quite hard to do, because I almost forget sometimes that I don't look the way people would expect me to and things like this. And I do sometimes feel uncomfortable. I've been to Brighton a couple of times recently and I still get looked at. And I'm kind of like, okay, because I've got a shaved head and I'm wearing a dress, but also like massive chunky trainers, because that's just how comfortable I want to be and things. And so I still feel, and when you're autistic, you can feel eyes. Like I can feel eyes. I wish I didn't. I would, because I'm in my own little world most of the time. But then you're like, I feel eyes. So, and obviously I don't feel unsafe necessarily. Sometimes I do. As you know, a female presenting person, I might feel unsafe in certain situations, but it can be hard and it can be uncomfortable. So like Rachel, you're like, I don't know if I would be wearing pixie ears. Is that more because it's just not your bag?
Personal choice. I'm not a pixie person.
No,
but you know, like a Batman cape, absolutely. You'll catch me running around Brighton streets with one of them on. I actually do have a Batman cape, but that's a story for another day.
And so,
but I think what you were saying though about there is privilege and there is a risk to it. I think, you know, personally speaking, I know I'll instantly lean into the fact that I can probably get away with a cis man on a given day, as long as I don't hear me speak. So I've always got that kind of, you know, that male passing privilege, specifically a white male passing privilege. So anyone hears me open my mouth and they're like, oh, not quite. And so, you know, I'll still lean into that privilege, whether I'm male or not. People from a distance with a hoodie on, ain't gonna know no different. And I think, you know, I will lean into that in order to be more neuroqueer. And then you'll meet me in person, then you'll be like, oh my God, that's a real queer or you know, neurodivergent person, because I can't shut up and I'm in your face. But from a distance, you know, I will lean onto that, because that distance is what keeps them at a distance and keeps me safe. Because it's that idea that if you get into a confrontation with me, I might be a bloke. You don't want to get involved with that. And I think actually for a lot of femme presenting people, there isn't almost that safety there as well. So I think it also speaks to gender privilege as well. The fact that, you know, I may not identify as a trans man or as a man at all, but I will still lean into that when I have to for my own safety. And not everyone who is, you know, mass presenting will be able to do that, and even pass enough to be able to do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't set out to pass in society. This is how I like to look, but I also acknowledge from a distance that looks very masculine. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, because I mean, I'm always very aware of the fact that part of my privileges, and those of you who've seen me in person here know that I am a mountain. I am a human mountain. I'm 6.5 foot tall. I am very big set. Like, I am not. One of the things that a lot of people say to me when they first meet me is, wouldn't want to run into you in a dark alley. Like, you know, and actually, on top of that, seeing me on the street, I just look like a normal sort of alternative person. I'm not, until I start talking to you, you wouldn't know quite and I don't like this word, but quite how radical some of my opinions are and some of my approaches to life. Like, if you just see me on the street, you'll be like, it's just a guy with a lip piercing and a shaved head. Like, but, and that affords me a lot of privilege. You know, I'm a big, truly enormous white guy. Like, very few people will get in my way or question what I'm doing. If I was really anyone else, there would be a much greater risk that if I was as neuroqueer as I am, it could be dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Did Libby want to?
Yeah, Libby had some thoughts.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. It's more of a question, although I feel bad now because it's nearly 8, which I know I kind of wanted to wrap up, but I'll try and word this. But I was thinking as well, because I'm kind of still wrapping my head around the theory, I guess. But something I was interested in is, especially someone like myself who doesn't always know how to feel an identity, I guess. So I'm interested in, because it expands the definitions of things. So neuroqueering might be autistic or gender. I just wondered how, going forward, how do you think people would know, I guess, what they would identify with, or going forward, or would it become more just everyone's an individual and it's just society, it should just be open with everything? I don't know, I was just kind of interested along those lines.
And is that all right, Libby, if I mention the conversations we've had before about gender? Is that okay? Yeah, because Libby's asked before, you know, how do I know if I'm a woman, for instance? And we were doing the thing of, well, no one can tell you. It's down to how you feel. If you feel like a woman, then you're a woman. If you feel, you know, and Libby made a really important point, which is, I don't know how I feel about most things. And so it was a difficult way of trying to us realizing that it can be quite hard to work out who you are and what your identity is if you experience like alexithymia. So the difficulty recognizing your feelings. I think Libby, is it fair to say, because you asked recently, didn't you, when we were doing some questionnaires and you have to do the demographics of your gender and stuff like that. And I think you asked why I use they, she, and how I use they is different to how Annette uses the pronoun they, and how Jacek is using the pronoun they. So sorry, go on.
No, I do find it, and I don't mean this in the way like we shouldn't be doing that way. That's not how I'm meaning it at all. I just find it very interesting when people use them in different ways, how you kind of find your own in that. Because I use a lot of how I relate to other people to kind of find, because in the end they're just the words, aren't they? And we use words to communicate things that don't really exist. You know, we use them to tell each other things, and it's just interesting with all the new language and different words how we navigate that.
So how, for somebody like yourself, do they work out, well, what is my identities? Because we're going to have lots. David's got their hand up.
And just especially with the definitions, this kind of, growing. I don't know, it's just interesting to me.
I think one important part for me, and finding identity, because I struggle with this too. As loud as I am about the identities I have, I still, it's like having a relationship for God but doubting it, kind of thing. Like that used to be my old existence when I was raised in a Christian household. But for me, developing identity has been in the liminal space of like contrast. So I had one mindset fed to me my whole life about my spirituality, my gender, my sexuality, my relationship style, what I'm allowed to be in, like literally all facets, basically fed this one narrative and struggled deeply because something in me was learning as time went on that the resonance just wasn't there. So as I went through college, had more lived experience, after college, found a group of people who were very queer and polyamorous and just like embraced life for what it is and its complexity. Finally, I had a space to experiment with the contrast I was experiencing. So I had this one narrative and now I'm seeing a new one. And in the contrast, and the difference between the two, I got to put myself in that space and be like, what feels more freeing, more liberating, more joyful, more peaceful? And naturally, I gravitated towards terms like non-binary, pansexual, polyamorous, because it's not that I doubt these things. I know for a fact now that I have these identities, I am these identities, but I think learning who we are is a lifelong experience, and it's always a gift that will keep giving when you engage with it. But I still struggle, even in my non-binariness. I still struggle, even in my pansexualness. I still there will always be, for me at least, a conversation that I'm having with myself about all of the identities I have. Nothing is set in stone. I feel like contrast is constantly happening because we're constantly bombarded by new stimuli, right? So it's more of like a check-in process and having that conversation and still pursuing the ideas of peace, joy, like euphoria, feeling respected, like that's where I gravitate towards, because I need people to bounce my identities off of to understand who I am. I think a lot of us, if not all of us, do in some way. But I just wanted to speak on that because I resonate with what you're asking about. I hope that, I don't know. I hope sharing that made sense, but yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And Rachel, it looks like you have some final thoughts.
Yeah, sorry, it's just because I've got to shoot off kind of now.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, basically, kind of summing up basically everything you've just said is that for me, not in response to you, Libby, for me, it went from she, that's all there was, she or he, wasn't it he, she, to, oh, what's this day stuff? Oh, that seems all right. All right, I'll do. And now I've seen it. That's it. Game over. It's in it. It won it. And I think kind of like what Jessica was saying is that I wouldn't have known that was an option unless I had been around other people who were like, yeah, why not try it? And like being visible with having it in their tag name. I was stupid and forgot to put my pronouns in, but I'm glad I didn't now because I might change them.
Yeah.
Business cards for Hodgson.
I did partway through this live.
Oh, I'm not that cleverly technology advanced. But yeah, so I just kind of wanted to summarize by saying, like, if it changes even over 50 years, don't worry about it. And also you'll find stuff that you'll come across stuff every time, like across your lifetime, and you're like, oh, I'm going to borrow that, or I'm going to take that. Like I am taking that. It's mine now. I'm it.
Take it.
So
I know that David wanted to say something, but I want to add to that as well, Rachel, because like I say, that's what's really empowering and makes you feel that maybe you're a bit closer to the identity that fits you right now. Because when I now watch back older lives where I introduce myself as a woman and I refer to myself and other people refer to me as she, I now feel slightly uncomfortable. And that's where so you can contrast with yourself as well, Libby. So like I look at those and I go, yeah, that makes me uncomfortable now. I'm more comfortable with they, she. I'm more comfortable with people not assuming as well, because the idea of neurotypical woman does not feel, it feels like a really uncomfortable suit or skin or something. And so I feel like I don't think I'm there yet either. Like Jasic's saying, it really is. I'm going to still be working out who my autistic self is until the day I die. I just know that at the moment I feel more comfortable than I did 12 months ago when I was using she, her pronouns.
Yeah, and I really want to add to this because this is literally what...
David. Sorry, I'm really sorry, but I really have to shoot, so I didn't want to do it halfway through and not say goodbye to everyone. So thank you for having me, and it's been, as always, fantastic, and hopefully see you again soon.
Thank you, Rachel. Bye. Have a good one.
Yeah, so like this stuff that we're talking about, it's literally what my most recent book was like about. Like this was the whole point of it. And I'm going to show it off here because I love the cover. It's a treatise on chaos. It's a very short book. It's more of an essay and a pretty cover. But like I, through my own neuroqueering, came to this idea in my head of the chaotic self, which is I can only know myself. I can't actually know the internal world of anyone else. And what I know to be true of myself is that identity is not a fixed value. Like who I am changes. Like I'm not who I was 10 years ago. And in 10 years' time, I won't be who I am now. So part of being neuroqueer for me is that recognition that all that matters is who I feel I am. So yeah, I identify as a man currently, a cisgendered man. But my idea of who a cisgendered man is should not be the same as who someone else's idea of a cisgendered man, because I'm an individual person and I can never quantify who that is by someone else's standard. Yeah, Jacek has a point to add here.
Sorry, I thank you for saying that, because I'm teaching a Gender 101 course online monthly now, and I make a point to say several times throughout, once like we start talking about gender out and as a social construct, there are as many genders as there are people.
Yeah.
You can't, like, we love this saying as autistics, if you've met one autistic person, congratulations, you've met one autistic person. No one person of any identity group can speak as for the whole. We're not a monolith. Like, we say this for every identity, so why don't we believe that for gender? Like, anyway, okay, sorry. I just had to throw that there.
Yeah, no, this whole idea I had of like the chaotic self, it's like, I am not a fixed value. I grow and change, and the things I am now are not what I will be in the future. They're not what I've been in the past. Everything about me is a constantly moving target. My gender, my sexuality, my expression of my neurology, every aspect of who I am only makes sense in the present. Like it's never going to make sense again. So as long as in this moment I am comfortable with who I am and I'm not doing any harm, then that is what matters. Yeah, this is the book, A Treatise on Chaos, Chloe.
Yeah, we need a link.
Oh, a link. Yeah, that's the new normal that's linked there. Hang on. If you just search on Amazon, A Treatise on Chaos, it is a really short book. It's like 3,000 words long, but
nice.
Like it's also laid out in as accessible format as it can be. You know, my larger font with the spacing
and if anybody, I hope it's okay to say, if anybody wants to check out my Gender 101 course, you can go to bit.ly, so bit.ly/101 gender. That's the registration form.
Can you grab that? Are you on a device that you can just pop that and we can?
I could try to text. I can text it in our like studio thing.
Yes, and then I can grab it. That'd be great. Yeah.
Thank you,
Libby. Any thoughts, Libby? Because we've said a lot of things.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, so kind of connecting that back with kind of identity and neuroqueering.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, would you link it to maybe it's almost like the owning of yourself outside of the words or the definitions we use maybe in society? It's kind of owning your present self in a way.
I think
yes,
it can be a number of things as well, though, because it could be, you know, trying things on like a hat Like, does
Yeah.
this work for me? You know, like I say, I started trying to use they, she pronouns. I don't think I will go to they, them. I at this point in time, I feel like this is the identity that makes the most sense to me right now, like David was saying, and basically what we're all saying. But what's important is that actually there are words and more words. We want even more words to describe our experiences. So, you know, David mentions and talks about asexuality and stuff. Like at one point there probably was just the term asexuality and there was a very narrow understanding of what that meant. And now there's more words and there's a spectrum of what it means to be, for instance, asexual. And that means that a person's more likely to find what fits them better at that point in time. So it can be a bit daunting, particularly when we are autistic and we like maybe patterns or we like things to be simplified and straightforward. It can be very daunting. But I think, yeah, the more words, the more understanding and descriptions we have for ways that people might inhabit the world, and then you try them on and go, yeah, this one feels okay, but not quite right. I'm going to try that one on over there. Right. So like Annette talks about, Annette's early 50s, and Annette talks about, you know, when they were younger in their 20s, there wasn't the term pansexual. So they would describe originally themselves as a lesbian, and then they were like, that's not actually right. I like men as well. And so they went with bisexual. But that still now it never fit them quite right. And now more recently we have the term pansexual, and that fits Annette better at this point in time. And who knows, in like 10 years time there might be another word and description that goes with it that Annette might be like, yeah, that one fits me even better, kind of thing. So you can see the progression of language and queering everything.
And this is the thing. It's like, if I had to boil individual neuroqueering down to something, it is exploring yourself in the face of a society that wants you to fit into preconceived notions without that self-exploration. But further than that, we collectively neuroqueer when we experiment with language and like that experimentation with how we identify things as a community is in itself like an en masse form of neuroqueering. So it's really about pushing the boundaries. It's not about setting boundaries into this is what neuroqueer is. Neuroqueering itself is about removing the boundaries so that we can search further for more meaning.
But I think for Libby, try on different hats.
Yeah, try on different hats. That's
metaphorically.
Yeah.
If you want to, you can. Yeah, if you want to, you can try they, them pronouns and see how it feels. I'm not saying you have to. That might not be what you're interested in going down the route of anyway, in terms of working out your identity. But you can try the things and try it with safe people and see how it makes you feel. And does it make you feel, like Jasik says, do you feel joy? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel it's more you? And if it doesn't, that's okay. You can revert back to the pronouns you had before, or you can find some new ones.
And I will say too, if you are listless, like if you're feeling like if the daunting effect of like there being so many options, if that really is too overwhelming, I would say starting with one piece of identity, like pronouns, for instance, if that's something you're interested in exploring. It doesn't have to be everything all at once, right? And even then, if it feels like you're never gonna find, because I've been there, like I'm never gonna find myself. I'm not, like, who the hell am I without my masks on anymore? Like that the grieving process of discovering you're autistic and all those things, or even queer in general. Like I just, from my own experience, even as I'm still struggling to find myself, there is something to be said about continuously choosing to have compassion and grace for that listlessness, like choosing to have compassion and grace for yourself, even if the identity part is missing or messy, like that compassion will engender more discovery because you're choosing yourself over and over and over again. And that's hopeful.
And like, you know, part of the reason why I came up with the idea of the chaotic self for myself was because my embodiment of growth is that my brain, I guess partly because I'm ADHD, or should I say ordophrenic? I don't know. You know, my particular way my brain works is everything all at once. That's just the way my brain does it. Like, I had this moment where I was like, nothing is real. And so I started experimenting with everything all at once. So the chaotic self made sense for me. That doesn't mean it's going to make sense for everyone. And that's the beautiful thing about neuroqueering is I don't mind if people out there want to take on board the chaotic self idea for themselves. Like, that's cool. I love that I can give you that. If it doesn't fit you, that's cool too. Like there is no one right way of being. Like, the things I talk about in my writing, in my own self-exploration, they are what is true to me. They're not necessarily what is true to someone else. So experiment with little bits if you want to experiment with little bits, or experiment with the whole thing all at once if that's what works for you. You know, life is like a work of art. You know, some people focus on the fine details and some people are throwing buckets of paint at the canvas. It's whatever picture you want to make it.
Amen to that.
Just wondering, have we confused you even more now, Libby? Which is possible.
I think on that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead, Tracy.
I was just going to say, I also budgeted just about an hour for our chat today, so I do need to leave as well. But I'm very grateful for this space. I always am. Thank you for hosting and for including me, and for this topic, because it is so juicy with good stuff. Like, I could rant on this for hours. I swear to God. And now I have like all these little notes on a Post-it so I could write a blog later. Wow, just good stuff. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, thank y'all. I'll see you next time. Much love.
Bye, Jason.
Bye.
I think Sai had a couple of comments to add.
Well, I just think these are quite nice to actually finish on because they're more like statements to wrap us up almost. Did you want to read them, David?
Yeah. So Sai says, one of the ways that neuroqueering can be achieved is by educating society about the diversity of human experience, including variations in cognitive and neurological functioning in all aspects, work, teaching, everywhere. I think that's really important as well. And in this context, educating about the diversity all forms of education are valid. You know, it could be formally educating in a lecture theatre. It could be flying your weird flag, you know, proudly. You know, whatever way you choose to educate people about these things is valid as long as we're not doing harm. And Sai also adds that this can involve challenging negative stereotypes and promoting a more nuanced understanding of neurodivergent individuals and the experiences we face. I think that's really important, because let's not forget that queer theory and neuroqueer theory and all of these concepts were born out of a wish to break free of those stereotypes, the negative ones that hold us back. And I think that's, you know, it's a really lovely thing.
Fantastic. Ben, do we have anything next week to flag already? No. Okay. Ben's just like a really loud no in capitals. So there will be a live next week, I imagine.
He had to put it in capitals. He's backstage. He needed us to hear him.
You only live once, sure. Okay. we're even neuroqueering expectations for lives, which is to be organized and actually know what's going on. I don't know what's going on.
The live next week will occur at 12 o'clock in the 12 o'clock in the morning at Flurb.
Blurb. Nice. And so I was just saying, go on, bugger off now. Okay, we could just neuroqueer the ending. Yeah, and we're not even going to do the typical ending. That's fine. Lovely. Well, thanks for people being here. Yeah, I've enjoyed this.
It's been good.
Oh, and Sai as a pigeon is like waving, just their head. Ben?